I now give the floor to Her Excellency Mélanie Joly, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Canada.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm speaking to you for the first time as Canada's Foreign Minister as we gather in this Assembly on the traditional territory of the Nalape people. The Secretary General has said that we are in rough seas, that a winter of global discontent is on the horizon, that we have a duty to act. I agree with him. From Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine and the impacts around the world, to the COVID pandemic, to climate change, to severe conflicts and hardships that now affect billions of people, the challenges we are facing are immense. These crises and the way we choose to respond to them are testing our shared commitment to the United Nations. That's why our decisions matter now more than ever. We have a choice. Either we respect and defend the rules that we collectively have developed for generations and that have given us the longest period of peace in modern history, or we accept that rules can be broken by the powerful, bringing us back to darker times of constant tensions and conflicts, with massive displacements, suffering, and losses of human lives. For Canada, the choice is clear. We're convinced that we need more multilateralism, not less. We need more of the UN, not less. And we need a UN that is effective, efficient, relevant, and accountable. Throughout its history, Canada has strived to act as an honest broker, ready to build bridges between nations and differing points of view. We have worked tirelessly over the years to conceive, develop, and strengthen the international system that we now know. We will continue to do so, and we will continue to do so with all of you. Last week, the Canadian delegation, led by Prime Minister Trudeau, met with leaders and civil society members from around the world. Canada has been listening, and we hear you. Many describe and condemn Russia's further invasion of Ukraine as brutal, illegal, and unjustified, as a violation of the UN Charter. We agree with you. Many describe the uneven recovery from the global COVID-19 pandemic as incompatible with simple fairness, but also as a danger to public health. Again, we agree with you. You shared profound concern that achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals is at risk. And we agree we must address this head on. People from all corners of the globe clearly said climate change is no longer on the horizon. It is here, and it is hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. This is undeniable. The hearts of all Canadians go out to those affected by the devastating floods in Pakistan, as well as to our fellow citizens who found themselves in the destructive path of Hurricane Fiona. Many conversations this week have focused on the harsh fact that more people are displaced by conflict and violence today than at any point in human history. I heard unmistakable appeals for accountability, including for the victims of Plight PS 752. Women and girls described their needs to have control over their own futures, over their own body, which is their right. Brave individuals shared deeply personal testimonies of their painful experiences of sexual violence in conflict. We believe them. Such violence is unacceptable and it must change. We must empower survivors in leading the path to their recovery and support them in the pursuit of meaningful justice. Freedom of speech, disinformation and misinformation, the protection of minorities, the rule of law, respect for science, facts, and evidence. Powerful statements were made on these issues this week. They speak to an erosion of civic space and democratic dialogue. Canada hears you. We do not come to these discussions with easy fixes. We have come to listen, to engage, and to share our commitments to respond to this moment in a positive way, with purpose and in a spirit of global solidarity. Mr. President, the world has heard terrible stories of Ukrainians losing loved ones to Russia's senseless war. This Assembly has spoken clearly and with conviction. Russia's aggressions against Ukraine violates the UN Charter. It strikes at the heart of the commitment we all made in building this organization from the dark tragedy of the Second World War. Rather than follow this Assembly's decisions and a legally binding order from the International Court of Justice, Russia has doubled down, including with a desperate effort to justify the unjustifiable. While the world gathered here in New York to pursue solutions for the greatest challenges of our time, President Putin informed that he will conscript more young people into his war of choice. He threatened our collective security with reckless and dangerous nuclear rhetoric. For Putin, this is a war to the death. For Ukraine, it is a war for life. Russia's war machine has caused enormous civilian suffering and destruction in Ukraine. The mass graves discovered in Izium are the latest demonstration of Putin's disregard for human life. The impacts of this illegal war are profoundly felt around the world. We must address the global food security crisis and other consequences of the illegal invasion with imagination and determination. And those who break the law must be met with the force of the law. A permanent seat on the Security Council is not a license to kill, nor to silence anyone, and it should never guarantee impunity. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, we are confronting major crises: the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and conflicts. Crises which used to be exceptions are now today the rule. These crises throw stark light on our capacity to achieve the goals of the Sustainable Development Agenda by 2030. We must work very hard to change what is which is underway today. There must be an urgent and global effort to save these efforts. We must rally and work together for the common good. The only way possible to go forward for both Canada and the world is that of achieving our SDGs. From the economic point of view, we have much left to do to reach a true equality between member states. We have closely listened to what our partners and our friends from the countries of the South have told us. We have heard their message clearly. The international financial institutions must be reformed. They must be capable of adapting to today's crises. And Canada will answer this call. No country must be left behind. We are working in lockstep with our partners for just and equitable reform of the international financial system. This is crucial for equity, but also for global peace and stability. Mr. President, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken the lives of almost 6.5 million people throughout the world. Canada is determined to end this pandemic and to prevent any others. Together, we will continue to combat HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. Last week, Prime Minister Trudeau committed to investing $1.2 billion to support these efforts. let us now turn to climate change. We must act with the same sense of urgency as was seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. Science has told us that we must do more, and we must do it more quickly. Hurricane Fiona, which struck several of the islands of the Antilles and eastern Canada, is but the latest example. From the Arctic to the small island states, climate change is an existential threat, and we are feeling its effects every day. Canada has committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030 and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And we have a credible plan to do so. Canada will participate in COP27 in Egypt, and we look forward to welcoming the world to my home, Montreal, for COP15 on biodiversity under the presidency of China. Our priority is to ensure the success of this conference, where we will work together to reverse this alarming loss of flora and fauna. Our own survival is at stake. Mr. President, there are no simple solutions to the challenges we are facing. But it is clear that to isolate ourselves, to disregard the rule of law, and to force people into silence runs counter to progress. And yet, certain countries are restricting civil liberties, violating human rights, and are conducting widespread surveillance of their population. This trend towards authoritarianism is extremely worrying. This phenomenon is particularly seen in the Xinjiang region of China. Here, the publication of the United Nations report on human rights is an essential step. Moreover, its conclusions reflect credible accounts of abuse which constitute crimes against humanity. Canada is concerned about the repression of human rights that we see in several countries. The universality of human rights is well known. We know that these human rights are universal by nature. Therefore, we cannot hide behind the pretexts of national sovereignty to violate them. There are limits to defending the indefensible. We are of the view that democracy, although imperfect, remains the best system to protect human rights and to make progress in sustainable development. All our democracies are facing challenges. At home and abroad, we must also deal with apathy, anxiety, and the distrust of our institutions. Mr. President, Canada is also determined to combat systemic racism, and we will continue to take concrete measures to pursue the path of reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples. In 2017, Prime Minister Trudeau delivered a statement here and spoke of our own heritage of colonialism in Canada. We are working unceasingly to rectify this dark chapter in our history, and we know that the full participation of Indigenous peoples is fundamental to the development of a more just world. Mr. President, equality of women and girls in all their diversity is crucial for peace, justice, and prosperity. As is the case in several countries, Canada is proud to have a feminist foreign policy. Together, we are building a global coalition to support equality. It is in this way that we will repel these increasing attacks on the rights and freedoms of women. In Afghanistan, Taliban is preventing women and girls from going to school. In Myanmar, the courageous women who are openly calling for a return to democracy are imprisoned by the military junta, tortured, and subjected to horrific acts of sexual violence.
In Iran, women protesting the death of Mahsa Amini are met with arrests and bullets. We salute their courage and join them in sending a strong message that women's rights are human rights. Today, Prime Minister Trudeau announced that Canada will sanction those responsible, including Iran's so-called morality police and its leadership. From Sudan to Haiti, women peace builders, human rights defenders, and activists are being targeted. We must continue to speak up for the rights of women and girls and to support, protect, recognize, and include women peace builders. We must also relentlessly pursue accountability for sexual violence. We will continue to push for justice for Rohingya women, and we will not rest until those responsible for sexual violence committed in Ukraine are held to account. The UN Charter enshrines faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of human person, in the equal rights of men and women. And yet, we are seeing rising violence, the widening crackdown on rights and freedoms, the exclusion of women and girls from the negotiating table, the boardroom, the classroom. Sexual and reproductive health rights for women and girls are being rolled back or denied in too many countries. None of this is by accident. These are all deliberate choices. To all women in this room and women around the world, we hear you. And Canada will always stand up for your right to choose. We will fight for your full, equal, and meaningful participation in all walks of life. We will speak up for your rights and dignity. No government, no politician, no judge, no one can take that away from you. Mr. President, as I've said, the world needs more multilateralism, more of the UN, not less. To do so, we must restore trust among us. The crises we're facing have shown both the strengths and weaknesses of the structures we built nearly 80 years ago. We have been able to respond to this more serious hardship with compassion and effectiveness. But we can do better. Political paralysis and the abuse of the veto are undermining the Security Council. We encourage efforts to reduce the power of the veto, to expand membership, and to ensure the voices of all are heard and responded to across the whole UN system. UN peace operations also demand our efforts. Today, peacekeeping faces immense challenges. Canada has long contributed to UN efforts to reduce conflict, and we will continue to do so. Engagement with the United Nations is a core commitment of Canadians. We were there at the UN's creation, and today we are more engaged than ever. We will always engage with candor and directness, because we do not equate diplomacy with deception or global politics with global platitudes. The UN Charter begins with the words, "We, the peoples of the world." We must remember that the fate of billions of people alive today and those yet to be born is at stake in all the work we do. We owe them our best effort of heart, mind, and soul. We can meet the test that time and circumstance have placed before us, with hope, with courage, and with a commitment to act for citizens today and for future generations to follow. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Canada.